Hey, it's .NET Rocks at Grape City.
But it's still morning.
It is.
And 3 days in Vegas, I'm starting to make poor adult decisions. I'm just saying.
Well, the coffee is flowing, however. Just don't stand in line at Starbucks.
Yeah.
You'll never get your coffee.
It takes a long time. There's another Starbucks.
There is?
Yeah,
oh, yeah. It's on the other side, yeah. Well, anyway, it's a good time we're having here at the Grape City booth at DevConnections in Vegas.
There you go. Last day.
Last day. And we're here to interview Scott Willeke of Grape City. And we're talking today about reporting.
Which is one of those subjects that's just not cool, and yet everybody does it.
Everyone does do it.
Yeah. It's always out there.
Why is it not cool? I think it's very cool, actually.
I don't know. I mean, how many times were we told that computing was going to get rid of paper?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to view. I think, we do a lot of reporting, and it's not on paper, though, these days, right? We see a lot of charts.
Yeah, we've gotten rid of a lot of paper.
Yeah. We're getting there.
What were you into ActiveReports and reporting before you started working for Grape City or Data Dynamics or wherever you came from?
Well, I think everybody's interested in data, actually, and like seeing a story from data. I just did this presentation on that, and that's one of the things we talked a lot about. Is how do you see a story in data? If you look at a table of numbers, you don't see it. So I think everybody is interested in it a little bit. At least you have some interest in it.
Yeah.
Right.
And at Data Dynamics, actually, my interest really came into play there with Dynamic Cube. I don't know, you probably remember that.
I do, yeah.
Back then.
And so Dynamic Cube turned into the analysis tool.
Yeah, a lot of the same concepts are there. A lot more visualization and analysis. But yeah, that's definitely where our heritage comes from. And always, it's not quite reporting. There is a difference between reporting and kind of exploratory analysis.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference, but they're all related.
What was your first reporting programming experience?
Huh.
You could say the C word. It's okay.
Yeah, you can say the C word. That's pretty much what
around when I first started, actually, I was doing support on Dynamic Cube. So a lot of the experiences that I remember were actually customer experiences. And customers coming to us and saying, I have this problem. I have this data, and I'm trying to see something. Or, I love your product. How the heck do I use it? How do I get my data in there and make it work? And so I had a lot of, not one real experience that stands out, but a lot of diverse experience.
So I guess I was trying to, because I know what mine was, and yours as well was, Crystal Reports, Access, Database.
Access.
Trying to get that to work. And the web came around, and I remember one of the Crystal guys came up to me, and, this was at IIS 1.0. And they, the V bits after IIS 1.0, and the Crystal guy said, "Hey, we got our reports running on the server." And I said, "Now I know how big and clunky Crystal Reports was on the client. You're gonna put that on the server? Are you kidding me?" That's sort of my thought. And then of course, reporting services sort of broke down the client-server barrier of reporting. ActiveReports.net, we've been using that. Since, once I discovered ActiveReports, basically I was, what am I doing with Crystal Reports? It was one of those aha moments. It was just lean and mean. And
yeah, well, we were developers, and we used Crystal too, especially like Assam, and you remember our other founders. They were tortured by Crystal for a long time, and, need is the mother of invention, or hatred maybe is the mother of invention.
Well, and it was the product that was in the box, right? That's why you ended up using it.
It was in the box.
It was the one in the box. But, we're sort of crossing between reporting and analytics here as well. I found, as a developer, building reports for my customers, and how much impact the design of the report had on their perception of the data.
Oh, yeah.
You could... I got to the point, I got this book. It was called How to Lie with Statistics. and it really read that and thinking about how you create reports, because you could absolutely influence people's opinions by the way you presented the data in the report.
Absolutely.
Right. Especially the statistics.
Yeah, well,
statistics.
As soon as you create a graph of any kind, you're now creating a sort of visual representation of the data that gives people a sort of immediate reaction, and then they look at the numbers. But they've already made up their mind once you show them the graph. If the line goes up, it must be good. Line goes down, it must be bad.
Up, good, down, bad. Yeah.
And
of course, the first data point that you pick in the range establishes that anchor. Like the book Kelly's reading it now, but Billy Hall has turned me onto this book, Predictably Irrational,
right?
Which is about the psychology of being presented with choices, and pricing is the first thing that they talk about. And when you establish a price of a product that's high, and then say, well, we'll cut it down. We'll cut down the price for you because you're special. Right. Oh, well, I got to have that.
Right.
So it's like a photograph. You're looking at a graph. There's obviously a begin time and an end time. You don't know that before 2000 or wherever my graph starts, it was down in the dirt. You don't know that. Or it was way up high.
Right. So we were just talking, I just did this presentation on data visualization and how to show data with and visualize data. You know? And one of the things that I talked about in there is that Stephen Few, who writes books on data visualization, he says in one of his books that we don't say, when we understand something, we say, I see, like, I see. Right. And not, I hear, or, I feel. We don't, because visualization it's a visual thing, and our vision is very powerful. So when you take data from having to think about it and add up numbers in your head, and then you can just see it, like, there is the data.
And the brain really manipulates visual images. I mean, that's how our brains work.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're very visual creatures.
So getting into the sort of graphic side, doing your data visualization, do you have thoughts on the different kinds of graphs, when you use them, why you use them?
Yeah, you should have come to the presentation.
I should have, but
that's what we talked about. Yeah. For the last hour, that's what we've been talking about. There's definitely different bad ways to apply visualizations and good ways, right? They're powerful, so they can be distracting. They can tell the wrong message. They can tell the wrong story.
Right.
They can not tell a story and just give you complexity, right? And that's no good.
Yeah.
So, there's a whole series. There's a lot. I mean, some of the ones we talked about is like if you want to do comparisons, bar charts are really good for doing comparisons because the length of a line is really easy to compare one length to another.
Right.
Right, and you end up clustering them. You have 3 lines side by side that relate to 3 elements, and then another set of 3, another set of 3, and whatever's the longest is obviously the best.
Yeah, sure. The comparisons are good. But you really should have come to the presentation, man, because you're getting complicated.
Okay.
Are there certain graphs where the data will dictate which type of graph you can? Like, if you have a pie chart where everything's very close, is it better to have a bar graph, where you can see that clearly one is higher than the other?
Yeah.
Versus, if you have 3 slices of a pie that are 31, 32, and 33, I guess, does that add up?
Close.
Close?
Pretty close.
Yeah, whatever it is. Whatever fractions happen there. So does that, and can you actually program that?
Well, you can.
That's
and I like the way you said it at first, that should the data dictate the type of chart? It should, actually. But you shouldn't start with a type of chart and try to make the data fit into it, right? So pie charts, you talked about comparisons. In a pie chart, usually we want to compare some categories, right?
Yeah.
We have these different slices and we want to compare them. And it's very difficult. If you look at a pie chart and you have these slices that are pretty close in size, but one isn't like overpowering everything else.
Yeah.
If you try to compare the ones that are similar, it's very difficult. But if you put the same data, exactly the same data, into a bar chart, it's really compelling, right? So that's an example where data should dictate how we visualize it, and your story too, right? You have a story to tell.
Right.
So what's the best way to tell your story and make your point?
And I mean, for better or worse, pie charts are a relatively simple data set. I mean, you can display a lot more information in a bar graph or a line graph than you can in a pie chart.
Yeah, sure.
But it is, very visceral. If there's one big piece, right away that's the thing that's important.
So, I hate pie charts, actually. That's my bias. I think they're terrible. But, I noticed Steve Jobs is the master of presentations, right?
Yeah.
We all know that. And I watch his presentations. He uses pie charts. And I'm like, why the heck is he surely this guy knows. If anyone knows about visualizations, why the heck is he
design all the way, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, what am I missing? But if you notice, he uses pie charts in a case where it's like he shows Apple, it's over here, and then it's like Android is this big, or something like that. So actually, it makes a powerful point if you're trying to do that. So if you're just trying to show like I own you,
he looks like his slice of the pie is eating the other slices.
Right. He's got a Pac-Man in his.
He's got a Pac-Man, exactly.
So I think they work. If you want to make a really one big point, I think they can work. But in general, they're misused. Yeah.
If the data is roughly in the same ballpark, not a good idea.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, a pie chart where 3 slices are about the same size, not a good pie chart. You want,
Absolutely.
it's a simple set of data. I want to show one number dominating the others. That's the best way to show that.
Yeah, it makes a compelling point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean, for folks who couldn't go to your session, including me, why would you use a line chart over a bar chart?
So the first thing we talked about is, how do you think about data? You have to kind of analyze your data and think about what types of data you're dealing with. And the 2 easy types to deal with are quantitative and categorical. And quantitative things measure things, like sales. We're measuring something with sales. And you have categorical values, which are categories. They're groups of something, right? So a line chart is really good if you have a quantitative value on the y-axis. So if we have sales, it's really easy to look at sales on the y-axis.
Right.
And then on the x-axis, we could actually, if we do a quantitative value, it kind of becomes a scatter chart automatically, right? It could be a line chart. And time is another thing. Line charts are, anytime you see time data, you want to look at something over time, line charts are always the simple, best way to go.
And it always, I mean, every time I think of a line graph, even rather than a scatter graph, it's about showing a trend.
Yeah.
Things are going up, things are going down, things are holding steady. I mean, that's what you really get from a line chart.
Yes, a line chart and maybe a scatter chart with a trend line.
Yeah,
right?
with a trend line in it.
Yeah.
Can 3D get in the way of telling the story? I mean, a lot of people like the fact that they have their 3D controls, but if you take like a bar chart where you've got two-dimensional bars, you can clearly see the top of one. Does it make sense to turn those into columns and sort of rotate them out so now you're looking at them down from a perspective? Does that get in the way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so if you think about 3D, we're looking at if we're at a bar, a 2D bar, we're looking at the length of it. Maybe the width, usually just the length. Yeah. And when you put it in 3D, you have all these other attributes that we have to take in and understand. And
all you're trying to see is which one's higher.
Exactly. Usually that's exactly what we're trying to see. And I think it's interesting that, you could say that 3D has a whole perspective, a whole dimension that we could put with data, right?
With more information.
Maybe we could put more information in there, but usually tools actually don't let us control that axis. It's just a checkbox, 3D or not. Yeah. Well, how can you put a whole dimension in a checkbox? But even if you could, really, I think 3D is pretty complicated.
It gets hard to actually read the data in a useful way. Absolutely. And you're trying to communicate something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Less is more.
It's distracting and complicated. Less is definitely more in the case of visualization. Definitely.
And what about having lots of text? I mean, obviously you need to identify what the axes are, but I find that, you have that cognitive dissonance where you want to look at the chart, but now you're reading the text and somebody's talking. You're missing it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we have tables, right, for numbers. If you want to put numbers in text, and tables have their place. That's something we talked about. That if you need to look a value up and you need to know what that value is,
number.
You don't want to go through a bar chart or a line chart and try to find some number. Usually a table's best if that's what you need to do.
Have you ever done any, like when you're playing with a table, because I agree, sometimes you have to have a table, do you use tricks like color highlighting or bolding or something to pop certain numbers out of the
You can,
table?
yeah. I mean, they pop out. So I think if that's what your story is and that's what you want people to see, it works. Yeah, but you don't want to just add a bunch. You don't make every number a different color, right? Because then nothing pops. It's just like a headache.
Right? It's a headache.
No, I
Looks like Walt Disney threw up all over it.
Exactly, right. Then nothing pops. The whole thing is just disgusting.
I do like, you like using red text to highlight a number. That this is the one behind the trend line, or this is, below expectations, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's appropriate. Depends on your story. What is the point? What's the story you're trying to tell? If you want someone to see something, color works. Absolutely.
So these are some of the pitfalls that people fall into when they're doing reporting. What are some other ones that might not be so obvious?
I guess putting data visualization aside and talking more about developers and reporting, reporting tends to be processor and memory intensive in general. So that's one that I notice a lot of people, a lot of us, me included, kind of underestimate sometimes, right?
Well, reporting always seems to be an afterthought, right?
Yeah, very much.
You build it last.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we get a lot of people on the phone going, dude, I got to ship by Friday. I need it now.
What do you mean these tables aren't indexed?
Yeah, right. There's another one. That's another good example.
Yeah.
Right? Lots of data. You have to make sure that what is performance going to look like, especially in production,
Yeah.
I mean, when you have so many other things going on with the data and it's highly transactional, and now I want to look at all of the data or sort it, it's an issue.
Well, we get into this architectural discussion of should we separate our reporting databases from our transactional databases.
Exactly what I was going to go for.
Oh, yeah.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it depends, so you don't have to do it. And once you do that, then you have to deal with replication and keeping everything in sync. So there's a cost. But yeah, if performance is an issue and your databases are, in use a lot, or there's definitely reasons to do that.
You're talking to your customers a lot. What do they do? Do you see that, for example, do you see that a lot of customers jumped on the SOA bandwagon and designed their databases with a service-oriented architecture, which lends itself nicely to a separate reporting database?
Not really.
No?
I mean, actually, I don't. When we're talking to a lot of customers, usually that's not it. I mean, they're not usually using a real hardcore SOA. I mean, I think people are busy, So, and actually, I went to a SQL Pass in Seattle recently, where you have these database gurus, right?
Yep.
And one of the things, I don't know about you guys, but at sessions, I love to go up afterwards and listen to all the questions they're asking the experts.
Sure.
Right? That's always the interesting part.
That is.
And it's so interesting to me that when people come up, databases deal with a lot of stuff for us, right? I mean, they are awesome, actually.
Yeah.
We don't have, as programmers, if we put it in a database, we don't have to worry about concurrency and transactions and all this stuff that is really complicated in architecture. Databases deal with it.
Yep.
So I think one of the things, especially when it comes to reporting, it's very easy to just take a report, point it at the database, and it works, man. I mean, you get aggregation and grouping and sorting, and all of this stuff is done for free, right? And you don't really have to worry about it. So I think most of our customers, if it works, they just go with it.
Yeah.
And once it stops working, they go, maybe I should separate these databases for
do
reporting.
something else. Well, and the problem is that your typical, aggregate queries walking across a huge number of rows, and that impacts all of these little minute transactions that are going on at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The two are literally diametrically opposed.
Absolutely, yeah. And you have to, the indexes help in a databases. I mean, I don't know. I've known databases forever, of course, but I went there and listened to the problems people have, and they're such just complex problems because databases are really complicated, and they're just awesome. They do so much for us.
So there's been a big push lately for NoSQL databases, document-based storage, which if you're going to do reporting, you have to have a separate reporting database. Do you find that a lot of your customers are doing that? Some of them? Is it working out? I mean, because what Richard's talking about here is diametrical opposition between an operational database and a reporting database. The two are difficult to get the performance and the scalability for one and not for the other.
Yeah.
And for the other at the same time. So do you find that people are moving towards these NoSQL databases?
Sometimes, and a lot of times we don't know it because they'll report right on the objects.
Right.
They'll report right on some odd form of the data and not even go directly back to the database.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a lot now where the database is not so clear. It might come from a service, it might come from some calculations they do in code, and it can come from NoSQL, and it can change. They can change it on the back end.
Sure.
So we see some of that, but NoSQL to me, again, all the stuff you count on a SQL, what we call a SQL database, a transactional relational database for, actually I think the power of NoSQL databases is they don't do that stuff.
Right.
I mean, they don't deal with transactions usually. Yeah. They don't deal with all the indexing and stuff that we count on databases for. So as kind of a side effect, they become really easy to deal with. They don't have a schema a lot of times, so we can just throw anything into them and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
They're really fast, right? We don't have to worry about contention in highly scalable concurrent environments. But you don't get all the benefits you get from a typical relational database.
Well, and a lot of that turns into problems for reporting.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to reporting, I have looked at some of I like databases like MongoDB and some of these schema-less databases and document databases. But when you look at them for reporting, you have to write a MapReduce function to get an aggregate out of it.
Yeah.
It's not convenient at all. You can do it, but it's not convenient. You're much better off to, put a schema on it and throw it in a database for reporting.
I do like the idea of, especially when you look at stuff like Mongo and Couch and so forth.
Raven.
Where they're great on the app side, right? They're very quick to build on and so forth. And then in the background, you can go through that data and turn it into relational data, load it into a database. But you're no longer making the user who's entering the data wait for you to do that. You're doing it asynchronously, independent of the user actually working. I think that's a very logical progression. I mean, all these reporting tools are built for relational databases. That's what they're made for. I haven't really seen reporting tools that could be made for non-relational data.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
I don't even know if it's possible because it's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Well, you guys hinted that you don't need to use a database as a data source.
Right.
What is the interface that you?
So really, I guess one thing you don't really have to use relational. Actually, when you do reporting, one of the things you typically do is you take this highly normalized database with no duplicates in it, and you actually denormalize it for reporting, because you don't want to have to go take maybe a customer and he bought a product with a product ID that we normalized to get rid of the duplication, but actually you just want to put it all together. So it's always a tabular view of data, though. Always somehow, even though you're taking it from a hierarchy or maybe relational, usually you want to put it in a table. And I think we do that because it's an easy way to think of data. I mean, spreadsheets, I think that's why spreadsheets work, right? Because it's a table. And at the end of the day, it's like I have columns and rows, and that's an easy way to think about
it's an electronic form of a piece of graph paper too, right? Or ledger paper. Like, this is a form we've worked in for a long time.
Absolutely. So back to, do we report on relational? Actually, I don't think we do. Reporting in relational never really worked out too well. But we do it kind of we think of data in a tabular way. And I think that works. I think that's a useful way to kind of, if you can take any kind of data and put it in a table, then it's easier to understand it and imagine how to report on it.
Well, when I was asking about interfaces, I meant like programming interfaces. Can you report on an iList collection, for example?
Sure, ActiveReports, man, anything. iList, an array of data, just anything. I mean, essentially we have a collection of fields, which is kind of your columns, right? And then you can just shove values in it, and it'll pull them out of anywhere. And
that's just an option to passing a connection string to a database and saying, go against that.
Sure. Yeah, you can point it at a database, and it'll pull it out. But a lot of customers, like I mentioned, are reporting on objects, right? And we'll even reflect on the objects and pull the property values out. But you get this hierarchy of objects, right? And when you want to report on it, you do want to see it as flat. So at some point, ultimately we always give you these tools to get data from anywhere, but I always think of it as how do we put it in a tabular format, to report on it. I think that's
always where you're going to get to.
I think so.
It's just a question of how you compose that. I mean, it might be a SQL statement. It might be a map reduce, walking through a set of data to consolidate it onto that tab. But one way or the other, you end up with a grid of data.
Yeah, absolutely.
ActiveAnalysis. It's a custom control that is a totally self-contained business intelligence application. A developer can just go in the application, connect it to our data, give it to a business guy, and they can slice and dice and look and graph and OLAP their way to happiness.
Well, you go all the way to the beginning. What really happens? You make a report for your boss, and he says, that's great, now can you change it? And you become the OLAP cube.
That's right.
You keep building next version, next version, next version.
Yeah.
If you go all the OLAP way, well, now you're installing analysis services and building cubes, and you need consultants, and it's just too big and too much and too expensive.
Right. Basically, if you want to make the boss happy, just get ActiveAnalysis, put it in a wrapper, and give it to him.
ActiveAnalysis from GrapeCity PowerTools.
Smarter components for smarter developers. Does Metro and WinRT pose at current, in its current incarnation, does it pose a challenge to you guys in terms of what that client is going to look like in ActiveReports?
I don't know. I've been asking everybody here about, what do they think of Metro and WinRT, and I guess, does it pose a challenge? I don't think so, because, I think one of the good things about it is you can use .NET, you can use HTML and JavaScript, at least on the client, and of course we generate all these different formats.
Sure.
So I don't think it does, actually. And it's still web-based. It's still this concept that we have a server that's going to do the heavy-duty work and the database work, right?
Sure.
And then on the front end, we just need to show a different view of it.
So you're just spinning out HTML. There isn't going to be a Metro-style client for reporting.
I mean, we will probably do that when there's users for it and it makes sense for our customers. We'll do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it won't be a huge departure from what we do today. We're going to, just like other developers, We have forms and Silverlight and stuff, so it's the same tools we already know.
That's pretty much what I thought too. All the standard XAML controls are there, you know, for the stuff that you want in a report viewer.
Right, and we have a Silverlight viewer that does the pagination and thumbnails and whatever. So, what'll make sense probably at some point to kind of repurpose that and fit better into the client.
Yeah, the interesting bit in this, when you add Metro to the equation, you think about a line of business app. It's the widget, the thing you click on, because you can actually put data into that now.
The charm.
Yeah. Well, not the charm. The charms come in from the right, but the what used to be an icon is now they call a widget.
Oh, yeah.
And you could actually have data in that.
The tile is what you're saying.
That tile could actually reflect new information. So I just like the idea that it's running in the background, maybe checking against the reporting system to pull out a significant trend of some kind, because that's what I want to throw on that icon. Yeah. I look at that widget as something to say, pick me, I have something important to tell you.
Yeah, right.
Click on me.
Yeah.
And it's the reporting system that's going to find that information, and then you put that on the widget. The trick is consolidating it down to what fits on that little widget. It's like 2 words or an image of some kind, a little graph going up or graph going down. Like that to me seems really exciting. Actually, is yet another metaphor for data visualization on the widget to prompt people to action. That you need to go in here and do something about this.
That's a good point.
I think so. Yeah.
It's almost like Metro as a dashboard.
It is a dashboard, right? I mean, all these little tiles have some information, and it's all on one screen.
Yeah.
And it's actionable. You want to move on.
When I think about a line of business apps built through that interface, that's why I do it. Because now I decompose my app into all these different segments, and I'm looking at those widgets to figure out where I should go next.
I can't wait to see ActiveAnalysis for Metro with touch. I think that you guys have something there.
Well, man, I love that product.
I think that's a perfect example of a line of, it's not really a line of business application, but it's a business enterprise app that would totally home run on the tablet.
Because there's been a lot of work in terms of that sort of slicing and dicing for analytics, trying to drill into that thing. I just wonder if it's better served by touch. It's more natural for people to use touch versus a mouse.
I don't know. I think they're different things, So a lot of some people say these are consumption devices, these mobile devices, and some are, where you create things. So it depends. I think we do have to kind of shift so that we're not really exploring and looking. We're not going to do our work on a Metro device, I don't think. But it is very good that it's a dashboard and, I have an alert. I need to jump here, and I got something I got to do.
I'm already imagining what ActiveAnalysis is going to look like. I mean, with touch. Maybe not on a small tablet, maybe on a Touch Smart or something like that on a desk, but you're looking for an application that's an enterprise application that Metro would really benefit. I think that's it.
Well, that seems very Minority Report at that point.
Yeah.
Sort of dragging, big screen, drilling around on data.
Dragging the components from different, and filters and stuff, and having the stuff just change and 3D and all that. Oh, man, that's
really fun.
Minority Report. We just got to go straight to holograms.
Got to go right to holograms,
Well, part of the conversation I think it's been this whole week is it going to be touch or is it going to be gesture?
It's both.
Gesture is just an extension of, touch is a subset of gesture. The gesture can do it all.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe you have touch for the machine that's in front of you and gestures for the monitors that are up on the wall.
Right.
Or whatever they are on your desk.
That's seriously Minority Report.
Absolutely. Somebody asked me today, I did the moving to Metro talk just an hour ago, and this is why I wasn't at your talk.
Okay.
But somebody asked me today if it's possible, because he saw what Internology did with communicating between, what Internology did is they created a Connect interface for Metro. And they did this by talking to Connect in a service on the desktop side, and then using sockets to talk to the Metro app and getting that Connect data over sockets. And it works, and it's great. The reason that it won't ever ship is because you're making connection to the same machine, and that's not allowed. I think that's the restriction.
Yeah, but eventually there'll be a Connect SDK
but you
for Metro.
could connect to another machine, obviously. So what this guy was saying was, I want to use the tablet as a remote control, and I want to be able to control something in desktop mode on another monitor. Is that possible? What the answer is no, but you'll be able to connect to another machine through WCF or through the cloud. Maybe they'd meet up in the cloud And you could have your remote control for another machine using the tablet because that's what you have in front of you.
Sure.
And then I can walk up to a machine. It can understand who I am. It can connect me, and I can just start manipulating that machine with my tablet.
Sure.
I thought that was a brilliant, creative use of the technology. And it was just an idea. He was asking the question, can it be done? But, you know, all of these new possibilities change what you guys can do. And I don't mean you, GrapeCity, vendors in general, software vendors. It changes what we can do. And we're not limited by that box, that one screen anymore.
Absolutely.
We're interacting with multiple devices.
Absolutely. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Let me jump back into reporting for a bit here, because we've always had this idea that we want to let the users build their own reports. I've just always found it's a train wreck.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So, especially when you think of it from a developer perspective,
yeah.
like ActiveReports, right? Developers want to control everything. They want to write code in an event. They want to control everything with code. That's how they just love it, and that's why they love ActiveReports.
Yeah.
And then you have end users who don't know code. They don't even know SQL. They don't even know how to get the data in the report.
Yeah.
They have a completely different perspective on reporting. We firmly believe that they need two different designers, and that's why we've been building our newest product, ActiveReports Server, which is a business user-oriented designer, where they don't need to write code, but it still considers the developer on the back end that they can upload their old reports to it. They can control the data and how the database looks for those end users.
Yeah.
They can map the database and hide things and make the tables or the attributes look different to the end user.
Yeah, you don't want to let the end user make any kind of join, because they'll mess it up.
Well, actually, we'll take care of it, man.
Yeah, so you protect them from it.
We have a data model,
Yeah.
and you can control the relationships and how they work in the database.
But
and
they're
what
done
they
with
see.
English, right?
I'm sorry?
But they're done with language, English, not
Yeah.
asterisk equals.
Absolutely. They're done more like, instead of creating developers think, okay, I need to create a query and get the data.
Yep.
And actually, business users tend to think, okay, I have a chart, and I want it to look this way. So actually, we took a different approach where start with a chart or start with a tabular and just a table in a report, and just start putting the data in it. And you might start off with customer, and then work your way down to that customer's orders, and put it all in the same report. But since we have this data model, we understand the relationships, and we know that this needs aggregated, and we need to group by this.
Right.
That's what they want to see.
Yeah.
So we put it all together for them, and in the back end, we're building that query with the joins in a smarter way. But developers, they don't want to design reports this way, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they want to report on objects, and they know better how to get the data.
Sure.
They get it from weird things.
But as a developer, when I'm setting up this self-service module, I can say, well, these are the joins that are allowed. I could restrict those things.
Yes.
Sort of simplify it too. You don't want to give the user a huge list of tables to just scare them.
Right. Like before, we mentioned that databases are normalized. A developer, DBA, we have reasons to do this. It makes sense to do this.
Yeah.
But for a business user, it doesn't make any sense.
Now, you show a business user a many-to-many joining table, you just blow their minds.
Absolutely. And that's an example of something where actually that's a relationship. A join table is a relationship between two different tables, and we actually just take it out automatically. We can identify things like that and remove it, or you can actually denormalize the database right there. So you might have an orders. You want to show your business user orders. Well, they want to see customer as part of the order, and you can actually just take it and put it all together, and again, put it all in one data set for the,
So you
for the
can
business
tell
user to use.
you can tell by the relationship in the data what type of join they're going to use.
Right.
And do it for them.
Right, and the admin or the developer can go and even customize the view of it for the business user, and maybe denormalize it and hide those relationships. But we'll know how to generate the query and get the right data into the report.
So is it something like a report server really oriented for another web app?
It is definitely oriented for the web.
Yeah.
Because the designer is all browser based. Any browser, nothing to install on the client. So it is very much web-oriented, and again, we talked about scalability. The web presents interesting challenges for reporting.
Yeah.
You have now, instead of everyone running a report on their desktop, like we used to do in client-server, on the web, all those reports are running on the server.
Right.
The server, even on the service, actually, is a better way to think of it.
Yeah.
Right? And it'll take care of the scalability, load balancing, caching. I mean, developers have to deal with all these things today, so now we're actually giving them the server to help them deal with that, and specific for reporting, which is different. I mean, you think about an application, we do caching of a part of a page or something, but it's all different type of caching you want to do for reports. You know, there's caching of the data, there's caching of the document. It's entirely different.
Well, and I think part of this then gets into the sort of tuning of it. Like you're going to get this Monday morning crush where everybody shows up to work and runs all the reports at the same time.
Absolutely,
and that reporting server, which normally has a pretty good life, is suffering for the next 2 hours just trying to crank all these things out at once.
Yeah, common thing. So scheduling is one way to deal with that.
Yeah.
You can actually schedule a report and make it cached automatically.
Yeah, run it at 6
email
o'clock.
it to everybody.
Yeah, run it at 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't wait till 9 when everybody arrives.
Run that report an hour earlier, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Life is easier.
I tend to think that if I was designing a system from scratch today, I might want to try something like RavenDB, and I might want to have a separate SQL-based reporting database and try to write that code that that gets the data over to SQL Server, in a semi-real time, or maybe with a queue or something like that. It's the same kind of stuff we were talking about on the cloud panel last night. Because I tend to think that you're compromising on both when you're using the database for both. Whereas if we can think about that replication layer and getting that data into a reporting database, then we don't have any of these crazy restrictions on their application database.
Right. We don't have SQL for the web, right?
Right.
I mean, SQL is just a language, but actually it's really easy to use in databases and expressive. We can make it do a lot of things. But on the web, when you're getting data, you're getting it from RavenDB or MongoDB or some web service, which is really an API, and it's not standardized at all. It's not it's standard in terms of an API, but there is no standard way to get data and group it and filter it like we do from databases.
I also think that there are units of work in reporting that are different than the transactional side. I mean, every transaction is important in the OLTP side, but typically when you run a report, you want to report for the whole day. You don't actually want to report on a partial day.
Absolutely.
So this idea of separating, that RavenDB side from the relational database, you don't need all that real time. You need it by the end of the day.
By the end of the
have
day.
that whole day in the reporting system so that it's able to be reported on. In fact, I don't want to let you run a report on a partial day. It's confusing data.
Or maybe do it overnight so I get the report in the morning.
Yeah, it's ready.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think this idea of the relevant granularity of reportable data. Maybe you do have a business that reports hour to hour. Okay, we'll think that way. But I think most report day to day and even month to month. Like, does running your accounts receivable halfway through the month actually make sense? You want the whole month.
Or quarter to quarter, or fiscal quarter to calendar quarter.
Sure.
I mean, absolutely. The interval is important.
The cadence of how you update and gather that data on the reporting side is different than the way it's done in the transactional side.
Yes, absolutely. And usually a report is an aggregation. Usually you want to start with a big summary of something, you know, and kind of work your way from there. Usually the transactions aren't important. That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what's next for you guys? What are you working on that you can't talk about?
What can't I talk about? Well, we just started talking about ActiveReports Server, and that's what I devote myself to now. Really, is this.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a developer-oriented tool, and IT staff, that we're trying to help them. This all came out of their feedback.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now we're catering to business users and taking the technology we have from decades, literally. Man, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And trying to make it useful for business users. And again, they're a different audience. They need a different set of tools. And so what's next for us is really to create more tools for those business users so that we don't have to burden the developer so much, and hopefully it'll benefit everybody. And definitely web, more. We're talking about data in the web and different data sources, not always being a relational database.
Yeah.
I would say I can't talk about that we're going to do next.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you very much for talking to us.
Good. Thanks.
You guys are doing great
me.
work, and you obviously know your stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. Fun.
All right. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks.